What's up, YouTube automators? Caleb here. So this video, we're switching up a little bit. I'm not sitting down. I'm rather standing up, and I got this right here. I think it's called an easel or something like that. And you see what I have written out right here. It says the Dopamine Framework. Now, the Dopamine Framework is the framework to get people to watch your videos to the very end. That's what this is. This is a framework for your videos that you're going to be creating. And if you look at all the top creators on YouTube, they all follow this Dopamine Framework in some way, shape, or form. Now, I literally created this Dopamine Framework from number one, talking to Devlin for countless hours and him telling me about the thousands of videos he's uploaded, as well as the thousands and thousands and thousands of videos that he's watched in the faceless niches. I compiled this Dopamine Framework from thinking about what my friends do that have millions of subscribers and how their videos kind of operate this or like this. I took the Dopamine Framework from what I've studied on YouTube, as well as from what I've done in the viral videos that I've had on Facebook and stuff like that. I literally compiled a framework in which if someone follows it, it's almost guaranteed that you're going to get your viewers to watch to the very end, which guess what that means? That increases your average view duration, which increases how many people the algorithm shows your videos to, which means millions of people can see your videos and you can get paid a lot of money. So I'm really excited to be revealing this Dopamine Framework to you guys. And first thing that's really important to know about the Dopamine Framework is this word dopamine. That's the first thing you have to understand, because that's really the key thing here. Now, what's dopamine? Well, dopamine is a chemical inside a human's brain that was created a long, long time ago. Okay, humans have been having this since we were human beings. And here's how it happens. A human, back in the day, let's say like they have a necessity like eating food. So here's how dopamine works. Let's say a human being is a few hundred yards away from an apple tree and they see an apple. Well, how dopamine works is the human sees that thing and goes, oh, I want that apple. And that's when the first little hit of dopamine happens. And they get more and more dopamine the closer they get. So the closer they get to the apple, they get dopamine. They're one step closer. They keep getting more and more and more and more dopamine. And it continues to move them towards this apple. It's literally like a magnet. That's what dopamine is. It's a magnet to a desire. That's what dopamine is at the end of the day. And then they get that apple and they take a bite and then they get a rush of dopamine. Now, why is that created? Well, dopamine is kind of the motivation chemical. It is the reason why humans do the majority of things that we do. We do things that give us dopamine. So whether that be we watch shows that's filled with dopamine, meaning we want to figure out what's going to happen at the end. We're intrigued, we're curious, we're entertained, we're captivated. Well, dopamine is firing off in our brain. If you look at the top comedians in the world, they follow the Dopamine Framework. Like if you think about it, what do? They have a setup, which is something really, really funny. It's a story that has you captivated. And you're like, where's this going? I have no clue where this is going. Like you're fascinated. And it all goes the setup to a punchline, and then a bunch of dopamine gets let off. And then that is what makes the greatest comedians. They have fantastic setups that continue to give hits of dopamine throughout the entire thing to where you don't lose your attention. At the end, you get one rush of dopamine because you finally get to that thing that you desired, which is the punchline. And when you do this, when you follow dopamine, when dopamine goes off in people's heads, it's almost impossible for them to get distracted. When you're getting dopamine from something, like imagine, all the guys out there are on a date with a girl that you're super, super infatuated with. Well, you're not really going to lose attention on that date usually, obviously, unless you start going on your phone and stuff. But if you're really, really like all in with this girl, you're going to be getting a lot of dopamine. There's also other chemicals, but like you're going to be getting dopamine in your head because you're thinking about being with this girl for the rest of your life or whatever it might be, and that's the dopamine that's being let off, and you're not going to get distracted. If you look at the best movies, they have insane amounts of dopamine because it's literally hooking to the very, very end of the movie, and everything is leading up to one climax, and this is giving you little hits of dopamine throughout the entire movie. Chemicals are going off in your brain, and notice how it's literally like you're enthralled, and hours can go by. It's because your brain literally has chemicals rushing through it that's forcing you to be focused on something. So our goal with the Dopamine Framework is to create videos that let dopamine all the way throughout the video, and at the very end, they get the biggest hit of dopamine, and next thing you know, they watch the entire video, which raises your average view duration, and millions of people see it, and once again, you get paid. That's the goal. So let's go and dive into how the Dopamine Framework works and how you're going to set off dopamine in each of these steps to get the eventual thing, which is the very end of the video, which raises your average view duration. The first step of the Dopamine Framework is the hook. So that's where it starts off every single great video. If you notice, whether it be a faceless channel, they usually always open up with some sort of statement that hooks you to the very end. If you look at channels with faces, you look at vloggers and big YouTubers, they'll usually take 10 seconds. They're the most captivating in the entire video. They'll put it as the first 10 seconds of the video, but they'll only put 8 seconds in, and they leave out the 2 seconds. That's really like the climax of that moment, and you're like, man, I have to watch this entire video to find out how this little part ends. So people sometimes watch the entire video, even if 6 minutes of it isn't captivated, just because they're waiting for the end of that. So you want to hook. Now, the best way that I've honestly found to hook people is you just recap the title. People who click on a video, that's them saying, I want to see this video. So let's say you do a video. Let's use a top 10 channel because that's what a lot of you guys are going to be doing. Let's imagine you're doing a top 10 video called the top 10 things the Queen of England is never allowed to do. Well, someone sees that in their newsfeed. they click on it, you have a great title and thumbnail, you've hit the click-through rate, and they're on the video. Well, what are they looking forward to? They're looking forward to finding out the top 10 things the Queen of England can't do. So I would literally open up with, in this video, you're going to find out the top 10 things that the Queen of England is never allowed to do. And people already proved that they're intrigued with that, and that just doubles the intrigue even more. And now they have this dopamine of like, what are those 10 things? What is the Queen of England not allowed to do that I'm allowed to do? Like, what does she not have power to do that I have power and I'm just a normal citizen? It lets off a bunch of dopamine and makes people excited to watch the rest of the video. After you recap the title, or like let's say, because some of you guys are obviously going to be doing faceless or face channels where you're going to be doing celebrity automation, or also some of you guys may not even be doing top 10, which that's another thing to understand. The dopamine framework, this is a philosophy. Even though it is a framework, it's a philosophy that you're going to have to kind of plug and play and figure out how it works in your niche. This is specifically for people that are doing like top 10 videos. You're going to follow this to a T, but obviously every single niche is slightly different. So you're going to need to figure out what is the psychology. Once again, this is like kind of one of the patterns that we're teaching inside of YTA. You figure out what is the framework, and then you figure out the psychology behind that framework and figure out how you can implement it in your niche. That's really what I want you to do here. But for, let's say I'm doing a video, and my video is called how to make your first, or 7 ways to make your first $1,000, because that's something I did a video on that in the past, and I see a lot of people do videos on how to make your first $1,000. So let's imagine that's it. Well, I would open up my video with what? I would say, in this video, you're going to learn the 7 proven ways to make your first $1,000. Like, that would hook people. That would make someone who wants to make $1,000, who already proved it by clicking on the video, that would hook them to want to watch the entire video. The next thing you're going to do is you're going to say welcome to your channel's name. You immediately want to say what your channel's name is. That way they're familiar with who you are. So let's say it was me personally. I would say in this video, you're going to learn the 7 proven ways to make your first $1,000. My name is Caleb Maddox. Thank you so much for tuning in, and I can't wait to get into everything. I would open up and say my channel name. Or let's say you're doing the top 10 things the Queen of England is not allowed to do. Well, I would say, in this video, you're going to find out the top 10 things the Queen of England is never allowed to do. Welcome to my channel. This is Top 10 Britain. Like, whatever it might be. I'm just coming up with a random name. You're going to hook your channel's name. That way you have that in there. And the next thing is you're going to tease the climax. By now you did the hook and you recap the title, so people are looking forward to the entire video. But what you want to specifically do now is tease the highest point of the video that is at the very end of the video. And that's the important part. The peak of the video needs to be at the end of the video. So I would go, in this video, you're going to find out the top 10 things the Queen of England is never allowed to do. Welcome to my channel. This is Top 10 Britain. And if you were excited to find out the 10 things, you're going to be blown away by number 1. Like, that would hook someone. They're like, what's number 1? And now you have them looking forward to number 1 throughout all 10 of the points. And they're not going to skip because they still want to know the other 9. But you're going to literally get them. If number 6 isn't the most fascinating one, they're like, but wait a second. They said number 1 is going to be the best. So you literally hooked them to climax. Or for me, I would say, in this video, you're going to be learning the 7 proven ways to make your first $1,000. My name is Caleb Maddox. And out of the 7 ways, the last one is what I actually did to make my first $1,000, and it's the one that I recommend the most. So like, people would be like, oh, like, I want to find out the one that he did himself, and like, it hooks them to the very end. I tease the climax of the video. It's like, see, like, that's how it works. The next thing you're going to do, now the reason why I put this one in asterisk, because I don't recommend you do this, but you can, this is the only point in the video you're allowed to do this. At this point, you can put a little bit of fluff in there just to increase the average view duration. You're going to notice a lot of top 10 channels, they'll hook you, they'll say their channel's name, they'll tease number 1, and then they'll kind of just go on for like 30 to 45 seconds talking about like something that is like obviously on topic with the video, but it doesn't have anything to do with the top 10 things. And the reason why this is smart is because you have them so hooked that if you add an extra 30 seconds in that doesn't get to the first point of the top 10, then you just add an extra 30 seconds average view duration because they're already so hooked that if you got them at this point, they're not going to exit out because 30 seconds of it is fluff in the beginning. So once again, I recommend you don't put fluff in there. But if you are, I recommend you do it directly after you tease the climax because you have at least an extra 30 seconds of their attention. But if you do it too long, obviously they're going to exit out of the video and say, forget this. But if you only do it for 30 seconds, you do some fluff. And guys, I recommend go watch videos in your niche and see how they're executing this framework. See how they're doing it themselves. And maybe they're honestly not even executing it that perfectly. Then that's just a room for you to jump in and do even better than they're currently doing. But if you go look at top 10 channels, go look at something like The Richest. You'll notice they'll literally do this pretty much to a T. Maybe not as good as we're going to do it with YTA, but they'll do something similar to this. And then you're going to notice like how they do the 30 seconds of fluff. Even though once again I don't recommend it, at the same time it is an interesting way to get an extra 30 seconds of view duration and make the video just a little bit longer. That way people watch this a little bit more and YouTube shows your video to a little bit more people, which can compound into a lot. So if you're going to put fluff, put it there. Then once you're like kind of talking a little bit, now it's time to get into the content. Now this is a really, really important thing that you would never expect me to say up front, but here's what I'm going to recommend. Then you're going to want to put your best piece of content, okay? So if I'm doing the top 10 things the Queen of England's never allowed to do, whatever one is the most mind-blowing, I'm going to make number 10. I'm going to make it the very first one that I say. If I'm doing the top 7 proven ways to make first $1,000, number 7 is going to be the best way to make $1,000, and maybe someone will kill. Why would you put the best one first? Like, if you want to hook them to the end, shouldn't the best piece of content be at the end? Yes, but they don't know what the best piece of content is at this point. So what I recommend is the first thing you should say is the best piece of content. That way they say, whoa, if the Queen of England can't do that, and I'm looking forward to number 1, what is number 1? Or what else can't she do? If this is the first one, they say, this is probably the worst one, but in reality, it's the best one. Or if I say, there's 7 ways to make your first $1,000, and the first one is like the most practical, best way for someone to make $1,000 that people are going to do the most, they're going to go, oh my goodness, that's genius. I can do that. I wonder what the other 6 ways are. And then they're going to especially want to know, what is the number 1 that Caleb said he did for his first $1,000? So you're hooking them. So you want to put your best piece of content first. That way they expect every single piece of content to be up to that par. And I see a lot of people make the mistake where for this part, they will put their worst piece of content because they want to do worst to best. But guess what? You're setting the precedence that your worst piece of content is what at that point is the only piece of content they know. So they're going to be like, oh, that's lame. So like if I'm doing a thing, like I'm going to make like the first minute, you want it to be super entertaining and like super like like the first like part of the video, the first piece of content, you want it to be as entertaining as possible. That way you set the expectation that they think the entire rest of the video is going to be that way. Now obviously you want every single point to be entertaining. You want every single point to be interesting and intriguing. You want every piece of content to be the best piece of content. But figure out what the best piece of content is and see if you can throw it in the beginning. Little hack right there that's going to get a lot of dopamine because people are saying, man, like, for example, like if I'm on a road trip and they're like, this is the most beautiful road trip you'll ever go on in your life. It's like the most beautiful. And the first 10 minutes is literally the best part of the road trip. I'm going to be thinking, wow, the next hour, like say it's an hour-long road trip. If the first 10 minutes is the best part, I've been thinking, man, this next hour of this road trip is going to be unbelievable if the first 10 minutes were this good. Now, obviously, then you don't want to go from this beautiful scenery to a dark desert because then people are going to be like, oh, I got scammed. The first one was the best. But if it's just like the most beautiful and then the rest is also super, super beautiful, then you're going to get people to go on the rest of that road trip most often. But rather, if you start off and it's this really, really dark, like, it's like, man, that's not as good as they said it was going to be. So you want to start off with the best piece of content. Okay, next thing. Once you reveal your best piece of content, you now have people hooked. You have them like, wow, this video is entertaining. You're going to want to hook the climax again. So you tease the climax up here. So you say, you're going to want to see number 1. You do a little bit of fluff. You just talk. You increase the average view duration. You give your best piece of content. Number 10. Did you know that the Queen of England is not allowed to use toilet paper? I made something up. They're like, no way. And they're going to say, if you thought that one is interesting, you should see number 1. And they're going to be thinking, I did think that's interesting. I do want to see number 1. Guys, this is like really, really high-tech, really good stuff. If you follow this, you're going to get people to watch the end. So if I said number 7 is, the way you can make $1,000 is by doing X, Y, and Z strategy. They'd be like, oh my goodness, I can do that. And I say, and if you like number 7, you should see number 1. It's going to hook people. Like you want to hook people to the climax after you give your best piece of content because you just set the expectations. You want them thinking the climax is going to be better than the best piece of content they just saw. Next thing, you're just going to roll through the content. Now it's time, like you got them hooked hardcore. They're looking forward to the end. Now you just want to roll through the content. Give your other 5 points if I was doing, the 7 ways to make your first $1,000. Give your other, 8 points if you're going to be doing, the 10 things the Queen of England can't do. And then once you give your best piece of content, the last thing you want to leave off with is your second best piece of content. So you do best content, you hook the climax, you want to see the end. Then you just go through all the other content in the middle, and then you're going to want the second best piece of content to be the very last one. That way, it's not like one of the worst ones is last, and they're like, well, you told me this is going to be the best one. This is exponentially worse than the first one, but you want them to almost be equal. You want the first one and the last one, the first part of the video and the last part of the video to be the absolute best because people start off and you hook them and they're like, I'm going to watch the entire video. And then when you're starting to end the video, they're like, that kind of is like how they viewed the video. That's one thing I noticed even when I was creating videos on Facebook is I would always put the last quote like last, the best quote last, because I noticed that if I put the best quote last, people would just sit there and kind of bask in it for a second. So I could go on for like a minute doing this unbelievable video. But if I ended with, and and I just said the best quote out the gate, whatever the quote might be, the gun that kills the most people is the gunna, because people say they're gonna accomplish their dreams, but they never do. Something simple like that. I'm just like saying a random quote. But and then people be like, they'll just kind of sit there once the video is done, just be like, wow, that was really, really good. And they'll just be thinking about it. And then they'll go share that thing out. So it's the same thing. If like I was going to put the 7 ways, I would want my best out of the 7 ways to make $1,000 to go first, and then my second best out of the 7 ways to go last. That way when they hear that last way, they're like, I could do that too. And you want them sitting there thinking about it. Or, I can't believe the Queen of England can't do that. And now they're thinking, wow, I just learned some really cool stuff in this video. But if your worst piece of content is your last piece of content, they're going to be like, video is okay. So like literally the way that people work is either the best part or is the first part, and the last part is the ones that stick in their brain the most, because it was the first impression and then the last impression are the ones that matter. So you're going to do best piece of content up front, second best piece of content at the very end. And once you're done with your content, you're going to go ahead and recap, and you're going to do something called comment baiting. So you're going to ask a comment baiting question. So I would say, so guys, you just learned the 7 ways to make your first $1,000. I'm curious, which of those 7 ways are you going to do to make your first $1,000? Or I could say, I'm curious, which of these 7 ways to make your first $1,000 do you think would be the easiest to make your first $100,000 with? Or if I was doing the Queen of England, I would go, guys, you just learned the 10 things the Queen of England is never allowed to do. Which of those things would you be the most devastated if you weren't allowed to do? Or which of these things shocked you the most that the Queen of England, with all of her majesty, is not allowed to do? People are going to go to comments and be like, oh, this one blew my mind the most. This one blew my mind. Because engagement also improves the algorithm. So you want people commenting. You want people engaging on that video. And also, the more time someone gives you, it's the principle of invested time. In fact, this is a quick little tip I'll give you. It has nothing to do with YouTube. But you know one thing I noticed? Actually, one of my mentors' name is Glenn Twiddle. He did all sorts of different events with really, really big speakers. And he had people like Arnold Schwarzenegger. He's actually the one that introduced me to Arnold Schwarzenegger. He's hung out with Sylvester Stallone, Jason Statham. Literally, me and Glenn Twiddle both went to Arnold Schwarzenegger's house. And that was whenever I met Sylvester Stallone, Jason Statham, Arnold Schwarzenegger, and he's had all sorts of these really, really big speakers. And one of the things that Glenn Twiddle taught me is he said, Caleb, when you're doing speaking engagements and you're going to charge higher prices, like $25,000, because that's the fee I got up to. When I was like 15, I started charging $25,000 per like hour-long speech. He said, make your contracts as long as possible, because if someone is willing to go through 4 pages of a contract, they're definitely willing to pay you $25,000. And it's the same way. If someone's willing to go comment in the comments and say what their favorite part is, they're probably 6 times, random number, but probably more, 6 times or more likely to subscribe to your channel than if they just watched a video and moved on to the next thing. But if they go comment, like now they have a principal invested time. They've invested more of their time. They've invested more of their energy. They didn't just watch, but they engaged, they activated. You're going to get more subscribers and have more fans and have more supporters, which is going to help grow your channel long term. So like that's what you're going to end with. You're going to recap what was said, and they're going to ask some sort of question that baits them to put something in the comments. And then also tell them at the end, make sure to subscribe to my channel. And then the final thing you're going to end with, I put this one in green because this one's super, super advanced, and one that like very few people do, but the ones that do it, you'll notice, don't just have one viral video, but they consistently have viral videos over and over and over again, and that is the sandwich method. But here's the deal. The sandwich method, I'm not going to be revealing in this video about the dopamine framework. I'm going to be revealing it in another video inside of understanding virality. So I want you guys to go through the next few videos, and then in one of the videos, you're going to be learning what the sandwich method is, how to implement it into the dopamine framework, and that right there is going to be one of the most valuable parts of the dopamine framework, because it's not just going to get people to watch one of your videos, but it's going to get literally every single viewer can become 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 viewers over and over and over again. It's one of the number ways to go viral that a lot of people don't do. But if you do, it's almost inevitable that you go viral. So guys, let me go and recap real fast. And by the way, you notice how I gave you guys some dopamine right there? The sandwich method. You guys, well, what's the sandwich method? See, that's the point. I hooked you. Like, that wasn't even intentional. I literally just thinking about this now because it's kind of funny in the dopamine framework. But you literally got dopamine saying, wonder what the sandwich method is. And you don't get to know it yet, which is going to be more likely that you guys continue to go through the next few videos. It's the same thing. It's literally what this is. So let's recap dopamine framework. You hook by recapping the title, what the title is, get people intrigued. You welcome them to your channel. Welcome to Top 10 Britain. Welcome, or say, what's up? My name is Caleb Maddox, whatever it might be. You tease the climax. You guys, if you're excited about finding out the top 10 things the Queen of England can do, you should see number 1. You go ahead and if you're ever going to put fluff, you put it right there. And you talk for a little bit, increase average view time. You give your best piece of content up front, the thing that's the most crazy, the best piece of advice, the whatever it might be. You hook them once again to the end. If you like number 10, if you like number 7, you should see number 1. If this blew your mind, you guys should see what happens later in the day. If you're doing vlogs, whatever it might be, you then do more content. So you put more content in there, whatever the rest of the content is. You put your second best piece of content at the very last. You recap what was just said, and you comment you comment bait them by asking them a question that makes them want to comment, and then you use the sandwich method, which I'm going to be revealing to you guys shortly. That is the dopamine framework, and I promise you guys, if you implement this, the likelihood of you increasing your average view duration is pretty much inevitable. Your average duration, I really believe, if some people implement the dopamine framework, it could take them from a 10% AVD to a 60% AVD to an 80% AVD. In fact, literally, the people with the highest average view durations, they're the only ones doing this. So there's the reason, guys. The power is in the patterns. If the most powerful YouTube channels in the world are doing the dopamine framework, if they're following this, you go watch them. They're doing this in some way, shape, or form. Even if the steps get rearranged and they didn't even do it the right way, they're doing this in some way, shape, or form. You notice the videos that go the most viral, there's the most dopamine in them. It's like, what's going to happen next? Every single second is enticing. You want to go to the end. This works not just with this, but it works with anything where people spend their time on. Roller coasters. What roller coasters do people go on the most? What are the most packed roller coasters at theme parks? The ones with the highest drops. Why? Because that gives them the most dopamine, and that's what people are most looking forward to. It's like, I want to know what that drop feels like. The dopamine pulls people. It's the motivation chemical. It pulls people places. Literally, what foods sell the most? It's the one that give the most dopamine. Like, oh, that cupcake sounds good. Like anything that literally humans do is motivated most likely by dopamine. And now you know how to use dopamine and use the dopamine framework to increase your average view duration. That way you can use the chemical inside of people's brains to your advantage because you are just one video away.